All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another incremental language development design review meeting. We are looking at a variety of topics here today. So first up, tree scan traversal orders. 12 general possibilities. Oh my gosh. Okay. So,
But I think it's really 6 times 2, right? Not 12, right? Its factor is 6.
Or
Six
3 times 2 times 2.
right. Okay. So let's review. All right. Now, obviously, this is a trial run for what we might do with things like map in the future. Right?
Yes.
So
here we have tried to classify the general possibilities, and we wanted to discuss with you possible naming schemes. And then there will be other orders, like, for example, for binary trees, so cases with more structure. But we believe these are all the fundamental orders for general.
all right, let me remind myself what I briefly understood as I was working on. I don't think it is all. I mean, it depends what you mean by
general case would be a general permutation, but we don't want to be that general. It's more like the fundamental follow vertical, follow horizontal.
No, I understand that.
Right.
I understand that. So, I mean, this is, look, this is a new layer of language design because it is and it relates to a lot of what I want to do with multi-way computation and, parallelism and so on. So let's just remind ourselves what the issues are here. So let me just look at
Yeah, we have your nomenclature in the last line. Oh, I see.
Okay.
So the leftmost, outermost, etc.
Okay. But let me remind myself how this worked. Oh, wrong post. There we go. That's the right post. Updating schemes, the question of evaluation order. Okay. So what we're thinking about here is we've got these tree positions, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, how do we sort? So there's some WFR functions that do some of the sorting, right?
Yep.
Yes?
Yes, and I looked at them.
Okay. So, I mean, the most general way to do this is with some kind of sorting function, right? Most general way to specify this is you've given a set of candidates like this, right? You take the part number of every leaf. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Also, so these 8 are covered in the 12 possibilities.
I don't care. That's not the general case.
I wanted to say the 8 that you're talking about can be determined by sorting positions, but there are 4 that can't be determined by sorting positions.
Okay, I want to understand that. Okay, but the first thing would be, what do you visit when? Right?
Right.
Okay, so you've got a bunch of part numbers, and in general, what you're doing is, as you said, it's an arbitrary permutation. There is a sorting process where you don't know what's on the leaves, you just know where the leaves are, correct?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, and so then what I'm saying is that what you need is a sorting criterion based on part numbers, if I'm not mistaken.
That would be the fully general.
Yes,
case.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying we could
Yeah.
have a function that is called basically there's some option which says traversal order arrow, and then it can be a sorting function potentially. Right. That is one way to do it. That's the most general way to do it.
No, it's not the most. Like, there's 4 traversal orders
Okay.
that cannot be covered by that.
Okay, explain.
So it's the ones I'm talking about are depth order and reverse depth order. So there you need to actually know the structure of the tree. You can't just look at the position.
Okay. Explain why.
You need to, just from a position, you can't tell what the depth of the subtree is.
Why not? It's just the length of the position specification.
No, that's the level that the subtree is on.
Oh, you mean the depth below the subtree?
Exactly. So
I see.
some of these traversals
Okay, that's
go in
interesting.
terms of that.
Okay, I get it. So that's negative levels, basically.
Yes.
Exactly. I was about to say it's revenge of the negative levels.
Right. So what this is, okay. So let's just review what we know here, okay? So the first question is, there are levels, right? And that is one classification of, so levels are basically the length of the part specification, right?
Yep.
Positive levels are the length of the part specification. What you're saying is, it's also useful to know the negative level specification.
Yes.
Right. So this gives us, so it's this. Now, what is the analog? From the root of the tree, we can go and we can find this is this leaf here. Okay. This is this node here. Now, you're also saying, is there a way to come up from the bottom of the tree and find that node? And you're saying the only thing you're considering there is what is the depth of the subtree. But in principle, you can consider all kinds of attributes of the subtree. Right? In principle, you could have a sorting of subtrees. Am I making sense? I mean, in principle, right? The top. What you're saying is the path from the root to the node is what this is specifying, right? And so you're sorting paths. And then you're also saying you could, in principle, also sort with respect to the subtree, the hanging subtree. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Now, in principle, you could sort according to all kinds of other things as well. And maybe that's what you were starting to say with balanced trees. What is the additional sorting you can do with balanced trees?
Well, so for binary trees, there's something called an in-order traversal. So you do the left subtree, then the parent, and then the right subtree.
Okay, which is different from the numerical order of a tree that's been labeled by its numbers, or not, or it's the same. Do you understand what I'm asking? Every node in a binary tree, right? Every node.
If you did a
has,
depth first numbering, like 1 to n, and you went in order, I think that might be.
No, but in a binary tree, right? A binary tree represents, if we go, I don't know whether we can say carry tree, 15 or something. Okay, so here, if I say, I don't even know if this is correct for that. I don't think it is. It's probably -1 there. Okay, so 0, 1, that's not right. 0, that's 0, 1, that's 1, 1. I'm not sure if this is right, but basically this is adding, this is this part numbering, right? And you could imagine something where you're going, and maybe this isn't what you're doing, where you're going in the order of the binary decomposition of the parts. Am I making sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I got a little lost. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, here. But let's just take this tree. Just do it in the order in which these nodes are labeled.
Right? Isn't that just what we call the level or traversal, or I forget?
Well, it may be, but it's not one of these traversals.
Yes, it is. It's outermost, leftmost.
Really?
Yeah, so post order, pre-order, level order, and reverse level order are referring to these 8 that you have in the table.
Okay, but wait a minute. So what is the additional ordering for a binary tree that is not covered by this?
So the additional ordering would be the one that goes like 8, 9, or 8, 4, 9, and then 2, and then 10, 5.
8, 4, 9, wait a minute. 8, 4, 9.
Yep, and then 2, and then 10, 5, 11, and then
What
1.
is that? Is that something which comes from some kind of recursion? Is that natural for some kind of, that's natural for some kind of depth?
Yeah, so there's 3 kinds of depth first traversals. There's pre, post, and in order.
Okay.
And this is useful for like binary search trees.
Okay. All right. Okay.
The data will be.
Let me tell you my major problem with all of this stuff. Okay. We haven't started doing serious meetings about this multi-way computation story. And it is certainly related to this. Let me give you an example I was working on just yesterday. Okay. The issue is let's see how to best show this to you. Well, here I might be able to just show you. Okay. This is a friendly multi-way graph. And, well, this is an example here. Okay, see this nest graph here?
Yep.
So that's generated by that thing there. Okay, so now, if you think about these pieces here, if you think about every step here as a computation, we can ask in what order can this computation be done? Okay, so here, this is a Jose-friendly thing. This is a story of foliations. This particular one doesn't have any interesting foliations. It has no sense of space because it has that n goes to n+1, so it's a partial order which defines the thing to always go in this. And it doesn't allow anything to be space-like separated. Is everybody here physics aware? Should I explain what I'm talking about here, or do I not need to?
I'm not physics aware.
Okay, all right, okay. So the basic point is, in space-time, right, there are, if you say two events are time-like separated, if you have an event, you just sit in the same place, time passes, and you have another event. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's time-like separation. Space-like separation is events are at different places in space, and no light signal can go from one event to the other. Right? So a light signal, you get a light cone where you start off at some position in space-time, you produce this light cone. Okay, that is this expanding region that can be affected. You have a flash of light and it expands, and if you plot it in space-time, it'll be a cone. Does that make sense so far?
So that's like the out component in this graph?
Exactly so. Right, that's the light cone. Okay, so space-like separated points are ones that cannot be in each other's future light cones. Okay, they're points where, and the point is that in a postset, from a postset point of view, the possible, so you can make a choice of what counts as which points you say are simultaneous. Okay, if that makes sense, right? Because you can't say they're simultaneous if they're time-like separated. They have a definite time ordering. Makes sense?
Yep.
But if they're space-like separated, they don't have a definite time ordering. They could be in any time order in principle. You could say the Mars lander landed 2 years ago, and that's just a choice of coordinate system. You could say it's now, the year 2001 on Mars, and it's a slightly funky coordinate system, but it's not. Actually, that's a bad example. Because by that time, never mind.
So
forget.
Is this like the different levels in the tree on the left?
Yes, exactly. Yes, right. So in this tree, if this is an event, these are in the future light cone of that event. This is not. So these two can be space-like separated, and the notion are space-like separated, and the idea is that you make a foliation, you make a series of slices here, and those you call the things that are happening at successive moments in time. So it's a generalization of what you're doing here with tree ordering, because you can say there are multiple things which are space-like separated, which are all happening at the same time. Does that make sense? So what you're doing here is you're turning this tree into a total order. You're generating a total order on the tree that says visit this, then this, then this, then this. The generalization of that, which is the essence of the existence of space, I think, is that there can be events, nodes here that can be done simultaneously. Does that make sense?
I see the general connection. I'm kind of confused because like some traversal orders can go the opposite direction of the arrows.
I understand. Those are not valid foliations of space-time. I mean, you can choose to do it that way, right? You're saying you can define a total order on here that completely violates the arrows. Okay.
I would say it's just reversing the arrow of time.
Yes, that's fine. You could say that. But I mean, the reason that we're thinking about this, the reason that we care about the arrows here is we're imagining this is a computation that progresses with time. Right? We're imagining that what happens later isn't known when you're making the earlier stuff. That's not the situation you have with trees. With trees, it's a data structure, it's all there. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Whereas what we're interested in here is the thing is growing over time. It is growing down here.
Yeah. In your case, physics determines a direction. In our case, there are some problems in which you need to know first what happens to the parents, and other problems in which you need to know first what happens to the children.
Right. So you're not. So I mean, to give a sense of that, let's see. I was just looking for something here. Where do I have this? Here we go. Okay, so here we have a postset, basically, a representation of a postset, right? This is a depth-first traversal that, yes, that satisfies the postset relation. Am I making sense? That's a breadth-first traversal that satisfies the postset relation. That is, it shouldn't be the case that anything which occurs earlier in the postset has to have also occurred earlier in the total ordering. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Okay, so this is a DAG as opposed to just a tree here. And what we're saying is, right, so you're trying to generate a total order here. What I'm saying is there is a generalization of that in which you imagine you're doing parallel processing, right? Where you're traversing the tree, but there's some parallelism involved. Does that make sense? And in other words, the tree traversal orders you are defining are great, so long as you're operating on a sequential processor.
Yes.
Right. And I can see how some of these traversals could be done in parallel immediately.
Right. But the point is that this question of this foliation business, so to give you a sense of that, okay, so there's a trivial foliation here. Right? Does that make sense? So each slice, the events in that slice are space-like separated. Okay, this is another foliation. They're still space-like separated here. Okay, but this is a different ordering. This is a different way of making the sort of I don't know what kind of ordering it is. It's a It's an ordering, but some things can be done in parallel. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so the reason that I'm concerned about this is because, okay, so to be clear, the thing that has been a confusion for me for 40 years is the relationship between an expression tree and an evaluation graph. Okay, so as you run the evaluator, two things are happening. You're recursing through the expression tree, and you're also reevaluating and recursing through the reevaluation process. Does that make sense? So, I mean, in an example like this, okay, this n goes to n plus 1 to n. That's, in a sense, evaluation recursion, as opposed to recursing. I mean, in other words, if we did this as a substitution of some more complicated thing, we might recurse into that more complicated structure, then do this, then we have the recursion inside the structure as well as the recursion associated with reevaluation.
Do you mean that you allow yourself to revisit some nodes?
No, I just mean that there is a, okay, imagine you're looking at the execution trace of the evaluator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are two things that go on in that execution trace. One is map-like traversal of expressions, right?
Yep.
Where the traversal order that we're using, we have two traversal orders, one for functions that don't hold their arguments and the other for functions that do hold their arguments. In the case where they don't hold their arguments, it's depth-first traversal, right?
Right.
I think it's what, leftmost, innermost or something. Is that right?
Yeah. I would just qualify that I think both technically are considered depth first.
Okay. But which one is the holding?
Leftmost, innermost is the not holding version.
Okay.
And that's called a post order depth first. And the holding one, I think, is leftmost, outermost, which is pre-order depth first.
Okay. 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 All right. So, all right. So that's recursion in the expression. The other kind of recursion is you got a result, now you reevaluate that result. See what I'm saying? F of 7 evaluated to G of 19. Now you evaluate G of 19. That's essentially a time recursion. One was an expression space recursion, and the other is a time recursion.
Does
that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can see that.
Okay, so that's a very confusing thing. And as we generalize to the case, okay, so this is a typical multi-way graph, right? It's got multiple threads of evaluation going on here. And in this particular case, there's not a lot that can be done in parallel in a very interesting way because of the details of that. But even if we do this case here, where we're taking, oh, this is rather messy, but we're basically taking pairs of numbers and we're updating those pairs of numbers, there are things that can now be done non-trivially in parallel. Does that make sense? Just like here, we can obviously do lots of stuff in parallel. Does this make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so
like in a depth first traversal, you could conceivably be doing each child in parallel, or in a level order, you could be doing each level in parallel.
I think so. Yes. 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 I think that's right. I think here you could be doing right in a tree. There's a lot more you can do in parallel than in a general DAG. Does that make sense? Because you can always do in a tree, you can always do sort of independent branches in parallel. Right?
Yep.
Right. So if we're talking about like the expression space traversals, but the thing about reevaluation that might be.
Exactly.
Complicated.
That gets more complicated, right? As soon as you have shared sub-expressions, it's much more complicated, right? Okay, let's talk some practicality here about what we want, because let me just explain. There are two failures, two carcasses, as far as I'm concerned, in all of this. One is what happened in SMP, where I had a parameterization for evaluation ordering, which nobody ever understood. And two is our breadthfirst scan function, which again, nobody understands. Right? It's totally messy. And I mean, let's take a look at the breadthfirst scan function. Okay, so what is this doing exactly? And how does this, do you understand what this is? I mean, isn't this related to?
I mean, so this works on general graphs, and I don't totally understand that case, but the point is it gives access to all kinds of different events based on whether you're just discovering a vertex or an edge, or when there's a distinguishment between discovering and visiting.
Right. But it has a frontier. And the question is, how does it pick its frontier? Because what you're describing with your traversal order is a frontier picking scheme, isn't it? I mean, for me, okay, foliations are the frontier. That is as you move through the system, you know, the foliations define the frontier that you reach. Now, again, physics idea, you know, in the absence of closed time-like curves, that's the DAG condition for these things, right? A closed time-like curve is something where even though you thought you were progressing forwards in time, even though your edges were going, you know, down, 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 like this is an example of a trivial closed time-like curve, because you think you're going to the future down here, but actually you return to the same, in this case, the same place. But you could imagine there was an arc from here back to there that would represent a closed time-like curve. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I know Jose understands this, but Anitai understands it too.
Yes, you know, I don't believe in closed time-like curves because, you know, my whole dissertation was on, you know, making things globally hyperbolic.
Right. Well, I also am not an enthusiast.
There's a closed time-like curve right there.
Yes. I also deny the existence of closed time-like curves in the real universe. I don't know whether Jose has worked on metrics and things that have closed time-like curves, but
I have not.
Okay, so we're all anti-closed time-like curves. I've only worked on trying to help science fiction movies that have closed time-like curves and trying to unscramble them. Okay. So what's my point here? So my point is this function, not a very successful function in my opinion. I mean, I think this function is hard to understand for most people. And I don't, you know, how does it pick its frontier? Anybody got any idea? Okay, so it's got an order here. So it's visiting, but boy, somebody should change that into an echo. So this is visiting 1, 2, 3. Okay, I don't quite understand why that. Do you understand why it's doing that? And how does that, is that a pre-order traversal or something?
That's a level order, right?
Right.
Okay, so why is that called a pre-visit? Yeah,
so,
go ahead.
Yeah, so the relation with what we have for trees on the left is that we don't give access to discovery, just visiting, and we ignore edges. So the only action is when you visit a node, you apply a function to it.
Okay. Okay, so let's try to understand what okay. All right, so let's talk about your traversal order in the context of map. Okay, in addition to, so, okay, my biggest concern is I really want to put in this multi-way stuff in which you are basically defining, I mean, the concept, the proto concept is to have this construct called multi, which represents a set of elements here. But I think multi requires foliations. In other words, to define, you have, with a particular traversal order, to a particular evaluation order, you will get a sequence of multis generated. They represent the objects that exist in particular foliations. Does that make sense? Jose, do you understand what I'm talking about?
I think my interpretation of what you are saying is that what Ian is presenting here is traversal orders for tree map or tree scan, which will not change the structure of the tree. However, if we wanted to have some sort of traversal order for tree replace part, which allows changing the structure of the tree as the function is working, then we would have to worry about time in the sense of
in the sense of reevaluation, in the sense of the reevaluation process.
Exactly, reevaluation as changing the tree as you traverse the tree.
Right, but I'm saying that even if, I see what you're saying, but my point here, yes, I am more concerned with these dynamically being produced, but I'm imagining that there's this concept of a multi, which is essentially the content of a slice in a foliation. Right? Imagine that we have a thing called multi, which is auto listable, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the big problem with multi is that unlike when you have chains of functions, f of g of h of x, where the causal graph of the evaluation is trivial, it's just a chain, that's not true for the multi case.
But isn't multi in trees just the fact that there are multiple children? I mean,
yes.
With trees.
Yes. Right. Yes. It's much more straightforward with trees.
Right.
But the reason I'm bringing all this up is because I don't want to design for trees that's incompatible with what we want to do later.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's my real reason for making a big fuss about this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Plus, I'm also interested in the whole multi thing. I mean, I'll show you just an example of let's see. Okay, so this is the notion, the basic notion here is potentially of a computation object. Okay, so what's roughly happening is, if we take this whole multi-way graph, there is a sense in which, okay, so in an ordinary computation, we tried with trace to have some way of recording the computation process. Okay, it didn't work very well. This is yet more complicated as things get to be done in parallel. Not sure what this is exactly. What is that? That's nice. That's a very nice application of nest tree. That's really cool. So, but nest tree, oh my gosh, what does nest tree do? Nest tree, it doesn't have any evaluation order issue. Is that a true statement? Or does it? It must do, because it's nesting. Oh gosh,
so nest tree has two, it's really two functions. One is growing from a seed, and the other is its action on a tree, which grows each leaf.
Right, but it must have a traversal order issue, because it must be deciding whether it...
Maybe the order of the leaves, but not an order for the whole tree.
Okay, fair enough. Right. So the whole point of a computation object. Boy, it's complicated here. Okay, let's look back at what you've got. But you understand what I'm trying to connect this to? Yes? No? Maybe?
I think I see the generalization, and I was planning that this would be one of these cases in which we have a functional notation for the fully general case and then some named cases, which are much simpler.
I agree. I just don't want to mess up the,
We are not proposing anything here for the general notation, just some named cases. And actually, we could use even multiple naming schemes that are all understood in input.
Right. Okay, so let's say we had a traversal order and we also applied that to map.
Right. So these examples here, the numbers are showing the order in which the nodes are visited. It's always the same tree, but the numbers you see, they are different.
Okay, so you're proposing traversal direction and traversal order. Is that correct?
Not really. The truth is that the last thing Ian and I discussed is just having a single traversal order with named strings.
Yeah, okay.
For all the possibilities. But the implementation that Ian currently has this separation in traversal order and traversal direction. So it's 6 times 2.
Yeah, it happens that each of these traversals has a left and right variant, but we're concerned about potential, like in the general case, you might not always have a left and right variant.
So what? The general case will do, might have, what is it called? Boosterphon? What is that thing called? Languages where you go, instead of left to right, right to left, they go left to right, and then they go back the other way, right to left. Then they snake like that.
Right. So that's an argument against having the traversal direction option.
Yes. Okay. By the way, Michael on a live stream is asking, is this equivalent to happens before relation of distributed systems? Yes, it is. The Postset relation. Yes, it is. And like so many things in the world, these questions have come up in many different places. All right. So what is the relationship between, breadth first search on a graph? So does the depth first scan function that we have for a graph also work on a tree?
No.
So like, for example, here, breadth first scan, this could be a tree data structure here. Don't see any reason that shouldn't be supported.
It could start by converting the tree into a graph.
Yeah.
Fine, whatever it wants to do. But there's got to be consistency in, all vertices adjacent to the currently visited vertex are visited first. I see. So this is basically going out in a sort of this is basically making it's a Huygens principle story. It's kind of making light cones from every point. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And sometimes it revisits itself. So by the way, there should be an example in the documentation where you take a general graph. Maybe this is the example here. My gosh. What a complicated mess. What we should show here is the thing growing outwards. I see. The problem is this is a scan. And what you've got is a tree map, which for some bizarre reason, we don't have a breadth first map for a graph. Why don't we? See what I'm asking?
We don't have any kind of map for a graph.
Right. And the reason we don't is because right now for a tree, there's a distinction between structure and payload. And that distinction is much messier for a graph.
Mm-hmm.
But in principle, we could have a breadth-first map for a graph that would affect the payload.
Well, but what happens if two nodes produce the same output via the function? Then the new graph will be very different.
Well, no, but I mean, what you're saying is, it's like, I see. So the point that you're making is, with map, every node in the expression tree is visited only once by a map. But with a breadth-first scan in a graph, a node could in principle be visited many times in the scan.
Well, not really. The point I was making is that a map function would take a graph and return another graph with new nodes. But perhaps two different nodes of the original graph were mapped to the same node, which means that the structure of the new graph would be very different.
No, but you're assuming, which I wasn't, that the graph map actually changes the graph. I'm saying one of the things it could do is change only payloads. Just like tree map changes only payloads. It's only tree replace part that will change the structure of the tree.
Well, changing the, so like the payload in a graph is just the vertex name. Changing that will change the graph in general.
Will change the tree or the graph?
Graph.
The graph.
You have a graph.
No, I agree. I
one and
agree.
two.
Yes. Okay. I get what you're saying. Okay. What I was imagining is, with an annotation, you can perfectly well have a graph map that affects annotations but does not affect vertex names.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The reason is that in a tree, your vertex names are irrelevant to the structure because they are payload. They're not structure.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But the issue, okay, so let me just understand. The issue that I've been obsessing about in the case of multi-way computation is the issue, let's see. That reminds me, I need to, is the issue that the composition of functions is no longer straightforward. In other words, if you've got a thing where you got to this level, right, with jagged line across here, right? You got to that, you made a multi to that level. Sort of knowing how to compose that is non-trivial. If that makes sense. You have to have causal information to know how to go on, I think. Unlike a function, a single chain, where you just need to know whatever the output was and you keep bashing it, so to speak. Does that make sense?
I think another important difference is that in your case, you create the graph as you go, while
Yes.
we always assume we have an original tree to which we apply things, and even we don't change it in the structure.
Exactly. But the point that I'm making is traversal orders are things both for expression traversal and for reevaluation. They're relevant for both of those cases. It's the same idea, but it's being applied in two different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just like in the breadth-first scan case, its notion of the traversal order is this Huygens principle thing. Okay. So let's just understand this. So you're saying for a tree, which is the same story as with map, whatever you do for traversal order for a tree, you could as well do for traversal order for map. True statement?
Well, assuming the new expression with map is not going to change structurally. if the function evaluates and changes, then we have changed the tree.
No, that's not right. That's not how map works, right? I mean, map just paints things on the expression tree. If the expression tree then goes into conniptions as it evaluates, that's its business.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So the only difference is, I mean, if I write something where I'm just saying, let's do the explicit thing. So let's take, we can take one of these. We can take this thing here. Why does that beep? Why can't I copy it? Oh. Why is that beeping? What the hell is it doing? Now it copied. Why did it not copy before? What? Bug.
Maybe something related to the fact that it's inside the grid. I no idea.
Could somebody send me a tree?
Probably if you see that it's a cell that it's closed. If you open it, there should be there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's a tree. We should figure out that bug with the grid.
I got it.
Okay. All right. So there's a tree. So now let's say tree expression. Okay. Somewhat funky, but anyway, let's say, how do I make a tree expression with lists there without head wrapping? You understand what I'm asking?
No.
I want this as a bunch of nested lists, not using this node as the head wrapper for this.
I think you would have to do like replace repeated head arguments goes to list.
That sounds horrifying. I should be able to have a way to turn this into, well, it's not totally obvious what this should be because of that one. Okay, I admit it's not totally obvious what it should be.
So take that expression, do expression tree. Comma atoms. So you're saying you want basically this tree expression, but everywhere there's the interior nodes, you want a list?
I think so, if I'm not too confused. I think so, yes. I think so.
What happens if you
No, that's
this
not
tree?
right. That's not right. I don't know what I want. I'm confused. But let me take this thing here, okay? And let me just say map of echo onto this at level infinity. And let me say heads goes to true.
But sorry, in the previous expression, what happens if you do 3 expressions of that tree that you generated? Oh, it's null, right? So I think what you want is list instead of null.
Why is it null and not list, by the way?
Because that's what we put in the empty, what we consider as empty payloads.
I wonder whether there should be an easy way.
Treefold of out 274 using list? Maybe list of slot 2.
I mean, we're going down a slippery slope here. No.
Okay. I'll have to think about this.
Oh yeah, I do think in this case here of this tree expression thing, I don't know what else tree expression has in it. I think there's an argument that this argument should have something where you can generate where you can tell it what to put in instead of those nulls, perhaps. See what I'm saying? I'm not sure. We're getting off topic here. What I'm trying to show is that map has a traversal order. Right. Richard on our live stream points out.
Yeah, so map does a post order traversal.
Yeah, it's not the same structure. I agree. 3 should be a child of 2. Right. The thing we're getting here isn't the same structure. This original tree, as Richard has pointed out here, is much more like this. Even that's not really right. I mean, I agree that that sub-piece looks right. Okay, it's somewhat confusing to see how to do this. I think the question is, if this was Lisp, what would this tree be?
I can answer the other direction, which is if this was Lisp, that expression, the tree would become the Adams tree. So your in of 274 converts an expression to a S expression, basically.
Okay. Okay. All right. But let's look at this traversal here. So I believe it is the case that your traversal order for trees, for tree map, is identical to what we would need for a traversal order for map. That is my claim. Any disagreement with that?
No, I think the traversal orders suggested by Ian are applicable to map too.
Okay, so let's understand what it would look like in map. What is negative levels? What is the, if I do the same thing and I do level, I don't even know what the heck I'm doing here. I mean, does map, okay, so if I say level -1 there, okay, that does the same traversal order. That's just saying which part of the tree to paint.
Try list -1. I think that meant from
-1 is equivalent to infinity.
Right, so that's only going to be the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my point is, for map right now, the level spec is not a traversal order. The level spec is just saying which part of the tree do you paint.
Right. Map always does a post order traversal.
Post order means you're at the bottom of the tree first and then you come up.
Yeah. The bottom of the first child recursively. And then
right, well, we can see that happening here.
Child, yeah.
Okay.
It's not like the entire bottom of the tree, like you're going in child by child all the way to the bottom.
What? You're going in here.
You don't hit all of the leaves first or the lowest.
Exactly. You're doing a depth first traversal of the tree, which you call in your nomenclature what?
Post order.
People are going to understand depth first a lot more than they're going to understand post order.
Well, so post order and pre order and in order for binary trees are all depth first, and those are standard names for different kinds of depth first traversals.
Okay, well, we should have a default depth first that does presumably post order.
Yeah, that's the default if you don't specify right now in tree scan.
Well, so that's what you're saying. I understand, but is depth order depth first, or is that something completely different?
Something completely different.
Okay, that's not good.
No.
Okay, so depth first, which is a brand name, so to speak, for an ordering, we got to support that. And presumably it means what you're calling post order.
Yeah.
Now, arguably, it's better to have a more descriptive name like depth first, you know, depth first pre-order, depth first post-order. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the alternative would be just like you have right. Could you have a post along with a right? So it's depth first, post right, or something, or depth. I mean, the default is depth first, post left, isn't it?
Yeah. So in the agenda, we had a proposal for generalizing pre and post to the other traversals, even though that's not standard, but it is standard for depth first.
Okay, but so here, what we're saying is, what I'm suggesting
see,
is,
like under level order, I have pre-level order left as another option. So here using pre to mean start at the root and post meaning end at the root.
I understand. So other names for this would be depth first, and then there's top down, bottom up. Right?
Right. Yeah, I was also looking for something that looks as geometric as left, right.
Okay, well, top down, bottom up seems like that's that, isn't it?
Yeah, because I cannot remember pre and post.
Nor can I. Right. So, okay, so we've got, so then we've got is left and right. But we also should support, okay, what is outermost versus innermost and so on?
It depends on whether you do outermost before or after the leftmost. Like there's a difference between leftmost, outermost, and outermost, leftmost.
Yeah, I know. So how do we deal with that? So we have a list.
So what outermost refers to is the lowest level first, and innermost means the greatest level first.
So how do those relate to bottom up versus top and top down?
So outermost would be like from the top.
Okay, so it's top
Innermost
down.
would be from the bottom up.
Okay, so this is, so top down is otherwise known as outermost, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I kind of think we should support multiple names here. Bottom up is innermost. I should have used that in that combinator post, actually. I mean, these are standard names: outermost, leftmost, outermost, and so on.
Well, outer and inner make more sense if you're looking at an expression, because then you're talking about brackets. Whereas top and bottom make more sense when you're looking at the tree.
I see. Okay, fair enough. Okay. I mean, we could call this, do we have a place where I can save this? Is this agenda saved somewhere, or did you just send it by email?
I just sent it to you by email.
Okay, I have to save this somewhere. Let me actually save this in my, I guess I'm going to save this in a place that will not be readily accessible, which is unfortunate. So I don't really know what to do with this. That's going in my multi-way computation folder, which I suppose I should move into the language design area. Okay.
Yep, I got it.
You probably have access to that. I'm not sure if you do. Okay. So, okay, so let's just copy over what we're doing here. So then what we're saying here is, you know, this would be an alternative name here will be outer first, inner first. And then if we say left first, right first, or left, right. I mean, actually, this is left, right, right, left, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then the question is it, so left, right, outer, well, I mean, the natural thing here would be, okay, this is top down, so it's where you start and what direction you're going in. So this would be, I mean, the analog there would be outer in, inner out. Which is a little weird. I have to say that our tree expression tree, expression graph, graph, tree graph, all those kinds of things, I really like those. I'm finding having no trouble remembering them. So I just, this idea of the sort of the paired thing of where you're, where you started, where you're going, doesn't seem bad to me. But it is a little bit strange that the order here, so how does that relate in sort? We've got the possibility of multiple sorting functions. And is the way that you give multiple sorting functions and the way they detie themselves, is that related to this, or is that completely different from this?
I don't think I understand.
Well, so I think that the 8 on the left are about sorting. The 4 on the right are not really. And even the ones that are about sorting, they're not implemented by sorting.
No, I understand that, but I'm asking a question. So for instance, if we wanted to get, okay, so the next question is relation to sort orders. There's two points, relation to sort orders, and there's the relation to the operation of sort. Okay?
Right. So we have sort and reverse sort, for example. That's the sort of thing you're asking about?
Yes, that's right. But I'm asking, okay, when we do lexicographic sort, okay, versus sort, that affects, if I take my examples, wherever they were, these examples here, okay? So I have this thing here, right? That has a sort order.
Yep.
Okay, now I do lexicographic sort of that. And I get a different order.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Yep.
So this traversal order thing is also, if I'm not mistaken, an ordering on part numbers. Right? And the question is, how do you access the named ordering, which applies to part numbers in the case of, tree mapping? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, so this is the permutation we were talking about at the beginning. And Ian pointed out that it's not enough to know the parts. You also need access to the whole tree to know where that part.
Or put it another way, you can't get it by pairwise sorting the elements. You really need to look at all of the elements for some of the traversals in order.
Okay, I get it. But which ones? But there are some that you don't need to do that for. And what we definitely want is, if there is a sort order here, right? That sort order should be accessible to sort. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that sort alone is sufficient to do this tree stuff.
Okay.
That's an interesting suggestion by Sander. If sort by, that's an interesting suggestion. Let's say that sort by had access to a hash position, hash depth, a bunch of other things like that.
Right.
No, depth. This is not quite right. This isn't quite right. But this is another. So what you're saying is, if we were doing the permutation thing here, one thing to do would be to have access to that information about the subtrees. If we had access to the information about subtrees, we could decide traversal order by sorting, correct?
I think so, but it needs access to the whole structure.
Okay. Okay. So it's a comment here. from Richard, attribute grammars make use of top-down and bottom-up traversals and even give them their own names, inherit versus synthesize. Okay, I didn't know that. It doesn't surprise me that this would come up in attribute grammars. Okay, let's zoom out for a second here to what we're looking at. Okay, so I'm basically buying your claim that we should have a bunch of named traversal orders. Okay, I'm saying that they should work for map as well. I'm wondering whether there is a concept of those traversal orders for sort. What do I mean by that? I mean, sort itself, and I'm just fuzzily thinking about this, doesn't it, as it looks to structures, doesn't it have to decide which part of the structure is the more important one to consider for sorting purposes? And doesn't it have to do that by essentially a traversal order?
I think the key point in sort is the ordering function, which is a much simpler operation. It's going to take just two elements and it's going to decide whether it's...
I realize that, but Jose, what I'm saying is this. Imagine that we have here, okay, I don't know how this okay, the lexicographic sort is a innermost leftmost sort. Is that correct? In the sense that what it does is it is examining these expressions in an innermost leftmost way to decide what it cares about. See what I'm saying? As opposed to an outermost way where it's going to care about the length of the whole top expression or something. Is this making any sense? In other words, I claim there's an analogy, not at the level of, I agree, the ordering function, it's just a slam dunk, it just does its ordering, right?
Yep.
But what I'm saying is, by the time you are calling out ordering by words, so to speak, I claim there is an analogy between the depth first, all that kind of stuff here.
I see. So you're saying that we could have different orders just by deciding that we have a different traversal.
That's correct. That we care about things in a different order in the data that we're looking at. And I claim that we should be able to export directly certain aspects, maybe the whole thing of the traversal order here, to determine sorts. And that will in fact give you the thing that I had in that table here. It will give you for the part numbers. So I'm making the claim, which I may not be quite accurate, that, okay, these are part numbers. And so what was top down in the expression tree becomes something about leftmost, right, left, right for this or something.
It becomes the length of the part.
So I think what Stephen is saying is that in lexicographic sort, for example, we compare two of these lists from left to right. What if we wanted to do from right to left? Or what if it's deeper and we want to define the order of comparisons of elements?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Which comparisons do you do? So you've got two expressions and you are doing comparisons. And there's a question of which things do you compare first? So for example, here, what we're seeing is we're going depth first in lexicographic sort. We're doing depth first, and we're just comparing, in some sense, we're just drilling in and comparing the first thing. Whereas here, we're looking at the whole thing in the big and seeing what the list lengths are.
Right. Yeah, we could easily create an ordering function, which is based on trace scan with two trees. And then that trace scan would define the order. So we take the two expressions, convert them to trees, then traverse them.
I think it's something like that, yes.
And then as soon as one of the comparisons is true or false, we have this decided.
Sandra is saying you want to sort on depth first, but then lexicographic sort on position. I'm pretty sure we can parameterize lexicographic sort in terms of traversal order. I think lexicographic sort is a version of sort with a traversal order. That's what I think. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes, and only looking at depth at the first level.
But that's presumably a a top-down story or something. That's presumably simulatable by a traversal order.
I see. I see. If the heads are the same, you just keep going in until.
Yes.
Right. I see. Yeah.
Nick is commenting there should be a general traverse function that takes an expression and returns a list of sub-expressions. Not a bad idea. I mean, although.
I think that's just level with a traversal order.
Yes, that's right. That's level. Exactly. That's level, which is perhaps misnamed now. No, I see. It's simply level with a traversal order. It is level to infinity, for example, but it is a traversal order which determines the sorting of the things.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we could imagine a traverse function. We should think about that just as an alternative, which is the equivalent of level with level x per infinity. Right. Okay, let's go back up here and look at these. So one thing that's still bothering me is the fact that when we have a list of traversal order specifications, that it matters what order the traversal order specifications are in. Do you get what I'm saying?
That's a possible notation. Perhaps we can have just 12 different strings and they each one.
Possibly. I mean, the thing
or
just
even
bothers
more
me.
than 12 and have some of them are equivalent, like different names for the same thing.
Yeah, I would prefer to have it in a list, but I just think people are going to be confused by the fact that it matters whether it says left, right, inner, outer.
Right. So like where I have the list post order right, that doesn't matter. Like if you instead had that as right and post order, it's still the same thing. It's only when you're thinking of the rightmost, leftmost, and innermost, outermost specifically that this comes up.
But so if we said outer, inner, outer, which are synonyms for top down and bottom up, right? Outer, inner is a synonym for top down, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Inner, outer is a synonym for bottom up. Left, right, it's very clear what that is. Right, left, it's clear what that is. Right? And I think it's much clearer than just saying left.
So
we have,
sorry, we have 3 times 2 times 2. So your names control the 2 times 2. So then we need names for the other 3.
What are the other 3?
Depth first, level order, and depth order.
Okay, the names that people are going to know are depth first, breadth first.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean something?
Yeah, breadth first is the same as level order.
Okay, so that's level order.
Depth first refers to both post order and pre-order.
Okay, but
so I'll say depth first, post order, pre-order, breadth first, and level order are all standard. Everything else here is not standard.
we can have the standard names as well, like leftmost and so on. It's fine. But we need names that people can actually understand.
Right.
Okay, so depth. So what you're saying is the 3 cases are depth first, pre-order, depth first, post order, and then breadth first. Is that right?
Pre-order and post order is one case. Those are both depth first.
I know. So what you're saying is,
well, so you didn't list a third case. The third case is depth order, which is like, it's just my name that I made up because I couldn't find it.
Okay, hold on. So you're saying there's depth first pre, and there's depth first post. Is that correct? What do those mean?
Yeah, usually you say pre-order depth first or post-order depth first.
Okay, what does that mean?
Pre
What does it mean?
Pre
And
means
those-
you visit the parent before the children. Post means you visit the parent after the children.
Aren't those what we were planning to call top-down, bottom-up?
Exactly.
Okay, so we shouldn't do that. I mean, we can also have. Okay, so
Well, I'm saying
then
those are standard names. Like if we're supporting multiple names for things.
okay. Wait, hold on. What is outermost? What is outermost? Is that a pre-order thing, post-order thing, or is that something completely different? Because outermost is what I understood outer inner to be. Right? Outer inner means is the same as outermost, correct?
Yes. Outer
Okay.
outer corresponds to pre. Inner.
Okay, all right.
corresponds
So
to
there's
post.
yet another name here. So this is pre-order here.
Specific. Yeah, so that use of pre is specific to depth first. But yes, those correspond in the case of depth first. Nobody uses pre for breadth first traversals, but
But they could.
it could.
Okay, so that's pre-order. This could be post-order here.
Yes. So that's the correspondence.
Okay, so those are all equivalent then. Outer, inner, inner, outer, top down, bottom up, etc. Okay. Okay. So here, is this right? We've got depth first down there.
Mm-hmm.
So wait a minute. Depth first with inner outer means what?
Depth first with outer means you visit the root.
No.
And
I'm
then-
not talking outer. I'm talking our names. Outer, inner.
Okay, outer, inner, and depth first would be first you do the root, and then you drill down. Depth first with inner, outer.
Wait.
Okay.
First you do the root here,
Mhm.
and then you go 1, 2, 4, 8,
Yes.
9, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
Okay. Depth first.
With
With-
inner, outer would be you start at 8.
Why the heck is it called depth first if
It-
you're going to start at the root?
If you look at the call tree of both of these, it's exactly the same traversal. It's just what order do you apply the function? Do you apply the function before you do the traversal, or do you apply the function after you do the traversal? The traversal is exactly the same.
I see. Okay. And there's certainly standard names. Depth first and breadth first are standard names, and I don't see
Mm-hmm.
a reason to change that. Okay. Okay, fine. So do we now have it? I mean, if we've got depth first, breadth first,
Comma.
and what's that?
There's a third thing on that first line that we need.
Which is what?
Depth order.
What does that mean?
That's the negative levels.
Okay, that will be depth last, presumably.
I mean, it's probably best to try to come up with a name that doesn't have depth in it, but
Why?
it's because it's confusing with depth first. And I
No.
don't think it's
But
depth
what it
last.
is it's going, it's
It's doing the bottom of the entire tree rather than going child by child, which is what depth first means.
I see.
If you did depth order, you'd get all of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Okay, so it's
Before you go
basically
up.
leaves first.
Yeah.
I like that name.
And yeah. And so its outer inner would be really leaves last. And its inner outer would be leaves first.
But the problem is with depth first,
You go down to a leaf.
I know that, but it's depth, but you're not even going down. If you're doing the outer inner, you're doing the evaluation without having gone down.
I think the key point here is that depth first and leaves first give the priority to the vertical and breadth first to the horizontal. But the depth first is counting depths from the root, and leaves first is counting heights from the bottom.
I disagree. I think depth first is vertical, and then both breadth first and leaves first are horizontal.
Really? Well, I realize leaves first is kind of a mixture because it depends on the skyline of the bottom.
You could say the
Sandra
same
is
about
commenting, we
breadthfirst.
already have a name decision from breadth first scan and depth first scan.
Yes, but the difficult decision is the third one, this leaves first.
I know. But even depth first is actually somewhat confusing. I mean, we actually know what it means.
Right.
But it isn't, in fact, depth, the deepest first. I mean, other names here could include deepest first, but that isn't even right. That's not correct because the outer inner version of that.
Right, outer inner and inner outer will mess with you if you're using this first thing because it's going to swap first and last.
Well, I mean, we're going to use depth first because we've already determined that's a notion of ordering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to go in a second here. George on a live stream is commenting pre, in, and post order traversal. Yes, we know. And we will certainly support those names. But that's, that will be equivalent. Pre-order is equivalent to outer inner. Okay, so what's wrong with leaves first?
I like it. Of the names
nothing really. I'm just pointing out that if you did outer
inner for leaves first,
leaves last, but it's the same issue with depth first. So I don't really object to that.
Right. I mean, well, okay. Here's another. This is from Nick, but here's another possibility. This could be. Okay, I mean, one possibility would be to name this depth first traversal to make it clear that's the traversal, not the evaluation. Is that useful? Is that not useful? Is that just super confusing?
Right. So maybe it's clarifying because it explains why a pre-order and post-order are both the same traversal. It's just a matter of when you apply the function, before or after the traversal.
Okay, well, fine enough. I mean, traversal order, depth first traversal in outer inner.
And that's like outer and inner is telling you how to hook onto that traversal to tell you when do you apply the function while you're doing the traversal.
Right. And if we say leaves first traversal, is that right? Or is that if we outer inner, we could say leaves first traversal, you've traversed it, but now.
Yeah, you will inevitably, if you're doing outer inner or inner outer, you are inevitably going to have to traverse all the way down to all of the leaves.
Okay, so I think this is a reasonable way to do it. That then it's consistent with our breadth first scan, depth first scan. Depth, top, bottom, left, right. Is that correct, what Nick has said there? Are those, in fact, the possibilities?
Some of them.
Okay. But it's going to matter. Okay. Well, I think we've got a reasonable plan here. Okay, so the only thing that's bothering me is that depth first traversal, top down, left, right is different from depth first traversal, left, right, top down, correct?
Yes.
It's not terrible. But it doesn't matter if you put the depth first traversal, in principle, the only ordering that matters is top down, left, right versus left, right, top down.
Oh, wait, I misunderstood your question. You're asking if it matters whether you specify left, right before outer inner?
Yes.
Not if we're splitting it up like this.
Okay. Oh, because we've got
If
the
you-
depth first thing. Yeah, I see.
exactly. If you don't have that first row of the 3 categories, then you're basically simulating that with whether or not you have outer before left or left before outer.
I get it. I get it. Okay, this is looking good. Ethan is commenting, tree map indexed. What's the story with that? Do we have that functionality? Because we need it.
Can add it.
I think we should. All right, and that thing I was trying to do with tree replace on subparts, you're adding that, right?
Tree replace part.
Yeah, tree replace part with an arbitrary subtree.
Right. Yeah. So
I
tree
need to
insert,
go.
tree
I'm
delete, and
sorry.
tree
I have to
replace
go.
part will
I'm
be,
supposed to do another live stream. And I need something to eat first. So, okay, this has been very productive and yeah, complicated subject, but I think we managed to get to a good result here. Thanks to you guys. Thanks to folks on the live stream. Bunch of good suggestions, very helpful. And let's iterate further. And you'll hear more about multi-way computation and the things around that soon.